Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering creativity. I'm Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Alex Laing, who serves as president and artistic director of Gateway's Music Festival, and I would be remiss if I did not also mention a 2018 recipient of the Sphinx Medal of Excellence. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aaron. It's great to be here. Thanks, as always, of course, for the shout out on the Medal of Excellence, something I'm still very proud of, and just glad to be here with you today.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I am so honored, as always, to be able to talk with you. The work that you do and have done in the field, obviously, is just so significant. And there's so many different things that you work on and people and aspects of our art form that you impact. And so it's very, very exciting. And especially gateways. And so one of the things that I thought would be great is if you could kind of just share any of the key kind of program elements currently going on that our audience, first of all, should know about Gateways. And then I kind of wanted to talk a little more just kind of in terms of your leadership approach at Gateways.
Sure. Well, I think one thing to know about, of course, is our upcoming Spring Festival. That will be April 21 through 27th in Rochester and New York City, culminating in our triumphant return to Carnegie Hall on April 27th, 2 p.m. So tickets are on sale now. Wonderful program opening with Dvorak's Eighth Symphony, then intermission, then a set of songs and spirituals with Janae Bridges, another Sphinx Medal of Excellence winner, Grammy award-winning, amazing mezzo-soprano. And then we'll conclude with William Levi Dawson's Negro Folk Symphony. And all of that's going to be conducted by the incomparable Anthony Parther. So it's an exciting program. That's the culminating. First, we're also in that festival featuring Curtis Stewart and his Seasons of Change project. That'll be in both Rochester and New York City, and other just wonderful programs and so check our website. It'll all be up there.
Fantastic. I mean, that is awesome. And obviously will be such an impactful program. And to do it, obviously, in the venue of Carnegie Hall and reaching people and showcasing our artists, is just, right, so critically important. And, that kind of leads me, right, to kind of that in your role at Gateways is still relatively new. And I was curious because a lot of people who watch the show, they'll go from, different things. They might be doing more consulting or working in a specific area and then move to a different area and then ultimately are in, if you will, the big CEO seat. And just wondering if you could share, are there any either, experiences or approaches that you've felt and or are experiencing as you kind of take on this type of role, especially since there are some in our audience who either are recently in these types of roles or are hoping to come into them pretty soon?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm in it right now. So, stipulated that this is, sort of a brief from the front lines. I think that one thing I would just first and foremost say is that it's possible. And I think that's the most important thing, is that it really is possible. And yet, just like being a performing artist, or whatever your sort of first role in the field is, it takes a lot of work. You got to want it. You got to seek feedback. It's not always going to come to you. So that's the first thing, is that just to say that it's possible. I think the other thing to say is that, one thing, I've always been interested in, a variety of things. My original sort of beginning place is orchestras and being interested in them as organizations as well as ensembles. So I've been, exploring all of this the whole way. But I will say, just looking at that sort of dichotomy, performer versus administrator, for lack of a better term. I think Mark Niehaus, CEO of the Milwaukee Symphony, who used to be principal trumpet of the Milwaukee Symphony, once gave me some good advice about making this tradition, or just a good observation. And he said, you're going to have to get used to the joy cycle being different. And that I think has proved really true as I've gone through this over the last year. The cycle is different as a performer, right? It's like, it's kind of a new job in some regards, like every week. And if you're working outside of an ensemble, it's maybe new teammates, and there's a sense of beginning, middle, end of a project, and even the long ones are typically measured in months, not years. And so that this is like projects take a lot longer. There isn't that sense of like pick up the music, learn it, perform it, turn it back in. That doesn't that. And there's also, I think so that's one thing, the joy cycle. And then I think the work itself, there's a lot more work to be done defining what your work is. And that's something that I'm continuing to work at and figuring out how to get good at that and do that quickly. As a
Interesting.
performer, the problems are really thorny and complicated for sure, and sometimes complex, but I also know where to find them, right? I mean, the game as a musician that you've been playing since you're little is some version of begin upper left, end lower right. Right? I mean, as those of us who play from notated music, it's some version of that. Even if you're memorizing it, it's still like, can you do that, right? And so, whatever the problems are, you know where they are. They're on that page, right? And I think in this role, of course, the problems, the challenges, can be everywhere. They hide from you. They change shapes. They show up as this. They're shapeshifters. One day they show up as this. The next day they show up as that. And you don't know it's the same problem. You think you're dealing with two different problems, but it's really the same problem. So that, it's a different game, different puzzles in that regard, figuring out the objectives of the game, and the length of time it takes and all of that.
Totally, totally. And kind of building off of that, certainly many in our audience and or around the country are in the midst of a sense of change and transition.
Mm.
And right, and of course, right, you're describing this extraordinary work that Gateways is doing and working with so many of our artists, being artists from our community, from artists of color, and obviously specifically African American artists. And there are many who work in and or are steeped in the importance of these issues surrounding diversity. And I'm curious, kind of in this time, are you, is there anything either that you're focused on more, or that has your approach changed at all? I was just kind of hoping to maybe just get insight into how you're thinking, since you're at the pinnacle of this work that's taking place.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, thank you for complimenting Gateways. And while I might be at the pinnacle, I mean, there is a degree to which I'm a little bit inoculated against some of these questions, just because the 6 inches in front of my face right now are pretty full, right? With a new job. And so there's that aspect that I'll just speak to. I think, as it relates to Gateways, our work has not changed. The mission of the Gateways Music Festival is to connect and support professional classical musicians of African descent and enlighten and inspire communities through the power of performance. That mission is as vital now as it's ever been. The need to connect and support professional classical musicians of African descent is as vital and necessary as it's ever been. Thanks in part to the work of Sphinx, right? So there are like more people coming in the field. There are more professionals who are looking for places to go, places that center their work. So in that regard, I've got my plate is full, but to not sidestep the question, I'm doing a lot of listening, honestly, um, to a lot of things, including perspectives and personalities that I not only maybe don't agree with, but I think are intentionally, maybe in some cases, trying to offend and alienate me with the way they present themselves. But I'm leaning in just to learn, find out like what's happening, what kind of world uh, is trying to be shaped and formed. Um, and that's kind of it. I will, so yeah, I'm curious.
I
I'll stop
love.
there and see where you
Yeah,
go.
no, and I love that, and especially kind of, I love always, of course, right? Like I've got the work in front of me, right? And I feel like that's something, and sometimes immersing ourselves in the work, always helps. And then also, of course, the listening piece, and even sometimes, especially those who are, you might be so outrageously diametrically opposed, but to know and understand their thinking can be sometimes empowering and at the very least informative. So I
Absolutely.
definitely love that approach. And unfortunately, we are just about out of time.
Oh
But I
no.
know, right? I know it's like, but I always like to ask of all of my guests, right? This work that you're doing, and obviously so extraordinarily fulfilling, and there's all of the things, and when musicians are on stage and everything's being created, it's so awesome. But there's got to be the tough days. It could be dealing with the fundraising or programming or different artist scheduling, or who knows what it might be. And just wondering, as an administrative leader, any key mechanisms, best practices you use that could be helpful for those in our audience who are thinking about how to get past the tough days?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the only way forward is through, right? So also, I think embrace the suck. There just are tough days, and ask yourself, like, is this simply one of them? Or, every day, I think for me, right, there are ups and downs. Every day is going to present a challenge. Asking yourself, is this it? And, am I responding to it the way I sort of had planned to respond to it? Now, sometimes the challenges show up like, well, I wasn't planning for this, right? So, give yourself grace. Um, and for me, what's been helpful is, heuristics, frames, things that I can use to sort of, all right, let's take all the tasks and the to-dos and let's, push them out there. Let's put a frame on the table that I trust. Let's put them all back in now using that frame. And hopefully, I'm using the right frame for the moment in terms of helping me figure out what the next step is. That's kind of the best I got. I mean, and also like, yeah, sometimes it's just a ton of work.
I
Sometimes
love
it's
that. No, definitely. And especially also love that mechanism. Alex Lang, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for everything that you have done and continue to do in our field. And thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Aaron.